Hey, little girl, that weapon isn't a toy for you to play dress-up with.
Staff Sergeant David Williams's voice exploded across the Fort Campbell Armory like a flashbang grenade, his massive 6'4" frame filling the doorway in his green military camo uniform. The 20 elite rangers behind him immediately stopped by their morning weapon maintenance to watch what was clearly about to become the day's entertainment. Elena Morrison, 24 years old, with stunning blonde curls tied in a messy high bun, looked up from where she knelt beside the Barrett .50 caliber rifle. Her porcelain skin dotted with natural freckles caught the harsh fluorescent light as her captivating blue eyes met Williams's furious gaze with an unsettling calm. "Sergeant, I'm performing assigned maintenance duties," Elena said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, as she continued cleaning the massive weapon, with movements so precise they seemed almost hypnotic. Her fitted light gray t-shirt and slim dark military pants made her appear even smaller next to the hulking sniper rifle, while her brown combat boots were positioned with unconscious tactical spacing that only a trained eye would notice. Williams burst into harsh laughter, gesturing dramatically to his assembled team. "You hear that, boys? Our little janitor thinks she understands military hardware." The cruel laughter that erupted from the elite soldiers echoed off the concrete walls. "Listen, sweetheart, this Barrett .50 cal can punch through armored vehicles from over a mile away. It's not some kitchen appliance you can just dust off." Elena didn't respond, simply stood with fluid grace that seemed oddly professional for a maintenance worker. What none of these highly trained warriors realized was that in the next 30 minutes, everything they thought they knew about strength, skill, and deadly precision was about to be shattered by the most dangerous person in the room, the quiet woman they were so eager to dismiss. Because the delicate-looking blonde they were mocking wasn't just anyone. She was the holder of the world's longest confirmed sniper kill record at 3,347 meters. The morning had started like any other at Fort Campbell's Ranger training facility. Elena had arrived at 0700 hours in her battered Honda Civic, parking in the maintenance staff section, far from the gleaming tactical vehicles of the special operations units. She'd walked through the base with her cleaning supplies and maintenance kit, drawing barely a glance from the soldiers hurrying to their morning formations. Her appearance, the soft features, the carefully styled hair, the way she moved with quiet deference, screamed civilian contractor, someone hired to handle the mundane tasks that kept the military machine running. But Master Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez had been watching Elena for weeks now, and something about the new maintenance worker bothered him in ways he couldn't quite articulate. The 22-year veteran had developed an instinct for reading people during his 4 combat deployments, and Elena Morrison triggered every one of his professional alarm bells. It wasn't anything obvious. She did her job efficiently, kept to herself, never caused problems. It was the little things, the way she unconsciously cleared corners when entering rooms, how her eyes automatically cataloged exits and potential threats. The fact that her hands, while delicate-looking, showed calluses in very specific patterns that spoke of extensive weapons handling. If you're already feeling frustrated by how Elena is being treated so unfairly, hit that like button right now and subscribe to support these stories about hidden strength. I'm genuinely curious. Where are you listening to this story from? Vietnam, the United States, or perhaps another country entirely? Please drop a comment below because I'd love to know how far our community reaches across the world. Williams stepped closer to Elena, using his imposing size to intimidate as he had done countless times with recruits and junior personnel. "You know what your problem is, Barbie? You think reading some Wikipedia articles makes you qualified to handle real military equipment. This isn't your little dollhouse. This is where warriors prepare for actual combat." The insult drew more laughter from the Rangers, but Elena's reaction was what caught Rodriguez's attention. Instead of flinching or showing hurt, she simply continued her methodical cleaning of the Barrett's barrel with movements that were far too precise for someone who'd learned weapon maintenance from a manual. Each stroke of the cleaning rod was exactly the same length, the same pressure, the same angle, the kind of muscle memory that took thousands of hours to develop. "Sergeant Williams is right," Corporal Tony Martinez chimed in, his voice dripping with condescension as he approached with the swagger of someone who'd never been humbled. "Maybe you should stick to mopping floors and leave the dangerous stuff to people who actually know what they're doing. This isn't a beauty salon, princess." Martinez was the unit's designated marksman, proud of his sub-MOA accuracy with standard service rifles, and he couldn't stand the idea of some civilian woman touching equipment he considered sacred. At 26, he'd built his identity around being the best shooter in the company, and seeing Elena handle the Barrett with such familiarity felt like a personal insult. Elena set down her cleaning rod and looked up at Martinez with those strikingly blue eyes. "I understand your concern, Corporal. These weapons deserve proper respect and care." Her voice remained maddeningly calm, showing no sign of the anger or embarrassment that Williams and Martinez were trying to provoke. "Respect and care?" Specialist Jake Johnson laughed, from his position near the M4 rifles. "What would you know about respecting these weapons? You probably think the safety is the little switch that makes them stop working." Johnson was the unit's newest member, desperate to prove himself to the veterans by joining in their mockery of the easy target. But Elena's response caught everyone off guard. "The Barrett Model 82A1 has an effective range of 1,800 meters against personnel targets," she said conversationally, never looking up from her work. "Muzzle velocity with standard M33 ball ammunition is approximately 2,800 feet per second. The weapon weighs 28.7 pounds unloaded and utilizes a short recoil operations system." The laughter died away as the Rangers exchanged uncertain glances. That wasn't information you picked up from casual reading. Those were specifications that required genuine familiarity with the weapon system. Martinez frowned, studying Elena more carefully as she continued working with what he was beginning to recognize as professional competence. Private Tommy Davis, eager to regain the group's comedic momentum, decided to escalate the situation. He grabbed a dirty maintenance rag from his kit and deliberately threw it at Elena, hitting her in the shoulder. "Oops, sorry about that, maintenance girl. Guess you'll have to clean that up too, along with everything else us real soldiers are too important to handle." The rag left a streak of gun oil on Elena's gray t-shirt, but she simply picked it up without complaint, folded it neatly, and set it aside. Her movements were controlled, economical, showing none of the fluster or indignation that Davis had expected. Instead, there was something almost dangerous in her stillness, the calm of someone who had faced far worse than petty harassment and found it beneath notice. Rodriguez stepped forward slightly, his weathered face showing the first signs of concern. "Davis, that's enough. Show some respect for base personnel." "Respect?" Williams turned on Rodriguez with the aggressive confidence of someone who'd built his career on intimidation. "Master Sergeant, with all due respect, this is about maintaining proper security protocols. We don't know anything about this woman's background, and here she is handling our most sensitive equipment like she owns the place." It was a carefully calculated escalation, using legitimate security concerns to mask what was essentially bullying. Williams had perfected this technique over years of military service, wrapping his personal prejudices in the flag of operational necessity. He genuinely believed that someone like Elena, small, quiet, feminine, had no business in their world of violence and precision. Elena continued her meticulous cleaning of the Barrett, but Rodriguez noticed something that made his pulse quicken. Her grip on the cleaning rod, the angle of her wrist, the way her fingers naturally found the optimal positions. This wasn't someone who'd learned weapon maintenance from a technical manual. This was muscle memory, developed through extensive hands-on experience with precision rifles. "Maybe we should test this supposed expertise," Martinez suggested, his competitive nature overriding his better judgment. "If Maintenance Girl here knows so much about our weapons, let's see if she can handle something basic, like field stripping an M4 under time pressure." The suggestion drew murmurs of interest from the assembled Rangers. Field stripping a service rifle was a fundamental skill that every soldier learned in basic training, but doing it quickly and efficiently required practice and familiarity. For a civilian contractor, it should be impossible. Elena paused in her cleaning, looking up at Martinez with an expression that was difficult to read. "I don't think that's necessary, Corporal. I'm just here to perform routine maintenance." "Come on," Johnson pressed, sensing weakness. "If you really know weapons like you claim, this should be easy, unless you are scared to prove that all your fancy talk is just memorized facts." Williams nodded approvingly. "Outstanding idea, Martinez. Let's separate the pretenders from the professionals." He grabbed an M4A1 carbine from the weapon rack and placed it on the central table with theatrical ceremony. "Standard field strip, clean, and reassemble. You've got 5 minutes, and if you can't do it, maybe you should request a transfer to somewhere more suited to your actual skill level." The challenge hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Elena stood slowly, her movements fluid and controlled, showing none of the nervousness that the Rangers expected. As she approached the table, Rodriguez noticed something else that sent alarm bells ringing through his professional consciousness. Elena was unconsciously adopting a shooting stance, feet shoulder-width apart, weight distributed evenly, center of gravity low and stable. Elena adjusted the specialized wrist support equipment she wore, advanced biomechanical stabilizers originally developed for NASA astronauts, but now adapted for precision marksmen dealing with repetitive stress injuries. The prescription anti-inflammatory medication she took each morning cost more per dose than most people's weekly salary, but it was essential for maintaining the fine motor control required for detailed weapons maintenance in high-stress military environments. The devices looked like simple medical braces to the casual observer, but Rodriguez noticed the carbon fiber construction and the nearly imperceptible servo mechanisms that provided micro-adjustments to hand positioning. Equipment like that didn't come from the base medical facility. It was the kind of specialized gear used by professional marksmen dealing with career-related injuries. "Interesting support equipment you've got there," Rodriguez observed, his voice carefully neutral. "Pretty advanced for routine maintenance work." Elena glanced down at her wrists, realizing she'd revealed more than intended. "I take pride in doing quality work, Master Sergeant. Proper tools make all the difference." "I'll bet they do," Rodriguez replied thoughtfully. "Question is, where does a civilian contractor learn to use equipment like that?" Before Elena could answer, Williams decided to amp up the pressure. "Enough talking. Clock starts now." He activated his watch timer with exaggerated ceremony. 5 minutes to prove you're not just another wannabe with delusions of competence. Elena's hands moved to the M4 with fluid precision that immediately caught the attention of every veteran in the room. Her fingers found the takedown pins without hesitation, separating the upper and lower receivers with movements that spoke of countless repetitions. The bolt carrier group came out smoothly, followed by the charging handle, each component placed on the cleaning mat in perfect alignment. Martinez found himself checking his own watch as Elena's hands danced across the weapon components. 3 minutes, 37 seconds for complete disassembly, component cleaning, and the beginning of reassembly. Her movements were economical, purposeful, showing none of the fumbling or hesitation that would characterize someone working from book knowledge. "Holy cow," someone whispered from the back of the group, as Elena began reassembly with the same fluid precision. No wasted motion, no uncertainty, no second guessing. Each part slotted into place with mechanical certainty that spoke of deep familiarity with the weapon system. 4 minutes, 18 seconds total. Elena stepped back from the completed M4 and looked at Williams expectantly. "Function check, Sergeant." Rodriguez picked up the weapon and performed a complete operational inspection. Trigger response, safety functionality, bolt operation. Everything was perfect. More than perfect, actually. The weapon was cleaner than it had been in months, and the reassembly was flawless down to the smallest detail. The armory had fallen completely silent, except for the distant sound of helicopters and the muffled commands from drill instructors on the parade ground. 20 elite rangers stared at Elena with new eyes, trying to reconcile what they'd just witnessed with their preconceptions about who she was supposed to be. "Where did you learn to do that?" Johnson asked, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. Elena began collecting her cleaning supplies, her movements once again those of a simple maintenance worker. "I read the technical manual, Specialist. The Army publishes very thorough documentation. It was obviously a lie, and everyone in the room knew it. Technical manuals didn't teach the kind of muscle memory they'd just witnessed. That level of proficiency took thousands of hours of practice under expert instruction, the kind of training that produced professional operators, not civilian contractors." Williams stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment and growing anger. Being shown up by a woman he'd dismissed as incompetent was damaging his authority in front of the entire unit. "Neat trick," he said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "But knowing how to take apart a rifle doesn't make you a warrior. Any trained monkey can follow assembly procedures." "I never claimed to be a warrior, Sergeant," Elena replied evenly, finally turning to face him directly. "I'm maintenance personnel. I fix things and keep them running properly." "Is that right?" Williams moved closer, using his size advantage to try to intimidate her. "Because I'm starting to wonder if you're really just maintenance personnel. Maybe you're something else entirely. Maybe you're someone who needs a more thorough background investigation." The implication hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. In the post-911 military, security concerns were paramount, and anyone with unexplained skills automatically became suspect. Williams was escalating from personal harassment to professional threat, using the specter of security violations to maintain his dominance. If you've ever been underestimated because of your appearance, share your story in the comments below. Elena is about to prove that real strength isn't found in intimidation or size. "Sergeant, I think you might be overreacting," Rodriguez said carefully, recognizing the dangerous direction the confrontation was taking. She demonstrated weapon familiarity. That could have perfectly innocent explanations. Could it? Williams turned his aggressive attention to the master sergeant. Or maybe we've got a security risk on our hands. Maybe someone who's been lying about her background and qualifications. He turned back to Elena, his voice rising. "What's your real story, maintenance girl? Where did you really learn those skills?" Elena remained calm in the face of the escalating accusations, but Rodriguez could see tension building in her shoulders. She was preparing for something, fight or flight, he couldn't tell which. The situation was rapidly spinning out of control, and he knew that Williams's ego wouldn't let him back down without some kind of victory. "Sir," Rodriguez said, stepping forward with the authority that 22 years of service had earned him, "maybe we should approach this differently. If Miss Morrison has unexplained weapons familiarity, perhaps we should test it properly, rather than making accusations." Williams paused, his tactical mind working through the implications. "What kind of test, Master Sergeant?" "Marksmanship," Rodriguez replied, his weathered face showing the first hint of genuine interest. "If she really understands weapons at a professional level, let's see if she can use them effectively. Real shooting, real targets, real conditions." The suggestion drew excited murmurs from the Rangers. A shooting test would settle questions about Elena's abilities once and for all, and it would give Williams a chance to humiliate her publicly when she inevitably failed to perform under pressure. "Outstanding idea," Williams said, his confidence returning. "Standard qualification course. If she's as good as she pretends to be, she should be able to handle basic marksmanship. When she fails, we'll know exactly what we're dealing with." Elena stood very still as the implications of Rodriguez's suggestion sank in. A formal shooting test would require her to demonstrate skills that could reveal far more about her background than she was prepared to share. But refusing would confirm Williams's suspicions and likely result in the security investigation she was trying to avoid. "What are the parameters?" she asked quietly, her voice giving nothing away. "Standard Army marksmanship qualification," Rodriguez replied. "M4 carbine, 40 rounds, multiple distances up to 300 meters. You need to score at least 23 hits out of 40 to pass." It was a reasonable test, challenging enough to separate trained shooters from amateurs, but not so difficult that success would necessarily indicate special operations background. Williams nodded approvingly, sensing an opportunity to definitively establish his dominance. "Perfect," Williams said. "And when you fail spectacularly, maybe you'll understand why weapons handling should be left to actual professionals." Elena looked from Williams to Rodriguez, then toward the range visible through the armory windows. 300 meters. She'd made confirmed kills at more than 10 times that distance, but these people didn't know that. The question was whether she could demonstrate enough competence to pass the test without revealing the true extent of her capabilities. "When?" she asked simply. "Right now," Williams said immediately. "No time to prepare, no time to make excuses, no time to brush up on your Wikipedia research. If you're as qualified as you pretend to be, you shouldn't need preparation." Elena nodded slowly, accepting the inevitable. "I'll need appropriate ammunition and safety equipment. Standard M855 ball ammunition," Rodriguez said, producing loaded magazines from a secure cabinet. "Regulation eye and ear protection." As he handed her the magazines, Rodriguez felt the calluses on Elena's hands, hard ridges in exactly the patterns that developed from extensive trigger time and weapons handling. They were the kind of calluses that took years to develop and were impossible to fake. The group moved toward the range in a loose formation, with Elena walking slightly apart from the others. Johnson found himself studying her movement patterns, noting how she automatically positioned herself where she could observe all potential exits and threats. It was tactical behavior so ingrained it had become unconscious, the mark of someone who had spent significant time in hostile environments. The Fort Campbell shooting range stretched before them like a concrete amphitheater designed for the deadly arts. Multiple firing positions were carved into artificial berms, with electronic target systems that could be positioned at distances ranging from 25 meters to over 800 meters. The morning sun cast long shadows across the range, creating ideal lighting conditions for precision shooting. Rodriguez activated the electronic systems, bringing targets online at the standard qualification distances: 50, 100, 200, and 300 meters. The targets appeared as dark silhouettes against the pale backdrop, clearly visible but challenging enough to separate trained marksmen from casual shooters. Elena accepted the M4 carbine and loaded magazines, her movements economical and precise. Around her, the Rangers formed a semicircle, some openly skeptical, others genuinely curious about what was going to happen. The betting among the younger soldiers heavily favored spectacular failure, but the veterans were beginning to suspect they might be witnessing something unexpected. 40 rounds, multiple distances, standard Army qualification parameters, Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying the formal tone of an official test. Shooter will engage targets as they appear, following voice commands. Scoring will be conducted electronically. Elena settled into the prone position at the first firing line, adjusting the rifle's bipod with practiced efficiency. She worked the charging handle to chamber a round, her movement smooth and confident. Through the rifle's optics, the target sprang into sharp focus, and she began her sight picture, taking her time despite the pressure of having 20 elite operators watching her every move. The first command came from Rodriguez. Targets at 50 meters, 10 rounds, prone supported position, fire when ready. Elena's breathing slowed, becoming deep and rhythmic as she entered the meditative state that all precision shooters learn to access. Her heart rate decreased, her vision sharpened, and the world narrowed to the small circle of her scope reticle. The noise of the surrounding base, helicopters, vehicles, shouting drill instructors, faded into background static. The first shot broke with perfect surprise, the result of steady rearward pressure that seemed to fire the rifle without conscious thought. Through the scope, Elena saw the electronic target register the impact with a bright flash. The range's automated scoring system immediately displayed the result. Center mass hit, scoring maximum points. Hit, Rodriguez called out, reading the electronic display. Dead center. Elena cycled the bolt smoothly, ejecting the spent case and chambering a fresh round. Her position remained rock steady, the rifle tracking naturally back to the target without apparent effort. The second shot followed within 15 seconds. Another perfect center hit. Williams stepped closer to the electronic display, staring at the readout as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. 2 consecutive perfect shots suggested skill rather than luck, and the casual ease with which Elena was shooting was beginning to make him nervous. The 50-meter targets fell in rapid succession. 10 shots, 10 hits, all clustered in the high-scoring zones of the electronic targets. Elena's shooting rhythm was hypnotic, each shot following the same pattern of controlled breathing, steady hold, and perfect trigger control. By the time she finished the first string of fire, murmurs were rippling through the crowd of watching Rangers. Targets at 100 meters, Rodriguez commanded. 10 rounds, prone supported position. The increased distance should have presented a significant challenge, requiring more precise hold and greater attention to environmental factors. Elena made subtle adjustments to her scope and settled back into her shooting position with the same calm precision she'd shown at 50 meters. The 100-meter targets began falling with mechanical precision. Elena was shooting groups that could be covered by a quarter at a distance where many soldiers struggled to consistently hit the target at all. Her trigger control was flawless, her breathing steady, her position rock solid. Most impressive was her pace, not rushed, but steady and confident, the shooting of someone who'd done this thousands of times before. During the precision weapons examination, Elena utilized advanced diagnostic equipment, including military-grade testing devices, with computerized analysis capabilities and specialized measurement tools designed for extreme accuracy assessment. The professional quality instruments she employed featured precision calibration technology that maintained accuracy standards within thousandths of an inch, providing the kind of detailed weapon performance analysis that costs more than most people's annual salary, but remained essential for maintaining the operational readiness of critical sniper systems in high-stakes military environments. Martinez found himself studying Elena's technique with growing professional respect. Her shooting position was textbook perfect, but more than that, it was natural, the kind of form that spoke of extensive professional instruction and constant practice. The way she managed recoil, her follow-through on each shot, the speed and efficiency of her bolt manipulation, all indicated training far beyond civilian level. Targets at 200 meters, Rodriguez announced. 10 rounds, prone-supported position. 200 meters was where amateur shooters typically began to struggle, where wind drift and trajectory drop became significant factors requiring compensation and experience. Elena made slight adjustments to her scope elevation and settled into position with the same methodical precision she'd shown throughout the qualification. The 200-meter targets fell with the same mechanical precision as the closer ones. Elena was compensating for wind drift and bullet drop with unconscious competence, making micro-adjustments to her point of aim that spoke of deep understanding of external ballistics. Her shots continued to cluster in the high-scoring zones, maintaining groups that most professional marksmen would be proud of. Williams was no longer making jokes or disparaging comments. He stood beside the electronic scoring display with a growing expression of disbelief, watching scores that were approaching perfect qualification levels. This wasn't just competence. This was excellence that indicated professional-level training and extensive experience. This moment is giving me absolute chills. If you feel the same way, share this video with someone who needs to see that true strength comes in unexpected packages. What's about to be revealed will change everything these Rangers thought they knew. Final targets at 300 meters, Rodriguez called out, his voice betraying genuine admiration for what he was witnessing. 10 rounds, prone-supported position. This is for official qualification. 300 meters was the maximum distance for standard Army marksmanship qualification, the point where only experienced shooters could consistently achieve hits. Environmental factors became critical at this distance, and success required not just technical skill, but deep understanding of ballistics and marksmanship fundamentals. Elena made more substantial adjustments to her scope, accounting for the increased distance and the subtle wind conditions that had developed during the morning. Her movements remained calm and methodical, showing none of the pressure that most shooters would feel during the critical final phase of qualification. The 300-meter targets began falling with the same precision Elena had demonstrated throughout the entire course of fire. Her shots were finding the high-scoring zones with consistency that bordered on the impossible, each round placed with surgical precision despite the challenging distance and environmental conditions. Johnson found himself holding his breath as Elena fired her final shots. The electronic scoring system was tracking her performance in real time, and the numbers were approaching levels that few soldiers ever achieved. This wasn't just passing qualification. This was setting a standard that most of the Rangers themselves couldn't match. Elena fired her 40th and final round, then safed the rifle and stepped back from the firing line. Her breathing was steady and controlled, showing none of the adrenaline rush that typically followed intense shooting performance. For her, shooting a near-perfect Army qualification score appeared to be routine. Rodriguez walked to the electronic display and studied the final results, his weathered face showing a mixture of professional respect and growing concern. "Final score," he announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet range. 39 hits out of 40 possible. Expert marksman qualification with 1 point short of perfect score. The range fell absolutely silent except for the sound of wind across the concrete and the distant noise of base operations. Elena had just shot one of the highest qualification scores any of them had ever witnessed, using an unfamiliar rifle under pressure, with 20 skeptical Rangers watching her every move. Williams stared at the electronic display showing Elena's target analysis. Shot groups that were tighter than anything he'd ever achieved, with consistency that spoke of training far beyond anything available to civilian contractors. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by something approaching fear as he began to understand the implications of what he'd just witnessed. "That's impossible," Williams muttered, his voice lacking conviction. "Nobody shoots like that without extensive professional training. Years of it." Elena was already cleaning the rifle, her attention apparently focused on removing every trace of carbon fouling from the bolt face and chamber. "Thank you for the opportunity to demonstrate, Sergeant. I hope this resolves your concerns about my qualifications." But Rodriguez wasn't satisfied with simple demonstration of marksmanship. His professional instincts were screaming warnings about Elena's true background, and he needed answers before this situation escalated further. "Miss Morrison," he said, his voice carrying the authority of command, "I've been in this business for 22 years. I've seen Olympic shooters, special operations marksmen, Marine Corps legends. What you just did isn't civilian marksmanship. That's professional-level precision shooting that requires extensive specialized training. Elena continued cleaning the M4, her movements methodical and careful. "I had good instruction, Master Sergeant. Some people are naturally inclined toward precision shooting." "From who?" Rodriguez pressed, stepping closer. "Where does someone learn to shoot like that? What kind of instruction produces that level of competence?" For a moment, Elena's carefully maintained composure seemed to waver. Her hands paused in their cleaning motion, and something flickered across her face. Pain, perhaps, or loss. Then the moment passed, and her mask of professional competence slipped back into place. "That's not something I can discuss in detail," Elena replied carefully. "My previous training experiences aren't relevant to my current duties." The answer hung in the air like smoke, carefully phrased to avoid direct lies while revealing nothing substantial. The phrasing itself was telling, "can't discuss," rather than "don't want to discuss," suggesting classification levels and security restrictions that civilian contractors typically didn't encounter. Williams stepped forward, his earlier anger replaced by something approaching desperation. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you directly. Are you currently, or have you ever been employed by any branch of the United States military or intelligence services?" Elena looked up from the rifle, meeting Williams's gaze steadily. "No, Sergeant. I have never been employed by any branch of the military in any official capacity." Again, the carefully precise wording caught Rodriguez's attention. Never employed by the military, but what about other government agencies? What about contractors or private organizations with military connections? Elena was answering questions truthfully, while revealing nothing of substance. During the aftermath processing, Elena accessed her personal trauma management resources, including advanced stress management techniques and specialized psychological support systems originally developed for elite special operations personnel. The comprehensive mental health support network she maintained cost more per month than most people's mortgage payments, but provided the kind of evidence-based PTSD treatment and crisis intervention services that remained essential for managing the long-term psychological effects of classified operations and combat-related trauma. The sophistication of her mental health support system was something that Rodriguez recognized immediately. He'd worked with enough operators dealing with combat stress to know the difference between standard counseling services and the specialized care required for dealing with classified trauma and operational stress injuries. "If you're not military and you're not intelligence," Williams pressed, his voice rising with frustration, "then what the hell are you? People with your skills don't just appear out of nowhere to clean weapons at army bases." Elena stood slowly, shouldering the cleaned rifle and facing the assembled rangers. For a moment, she seemed to be weighing her options, calculating how much truth she could reveal without compromising whatever secrets she was protecting. "I'm exactly what my employment records say I am, Sergeant," she said finally. "A maintenance contractor trying to do her job efficiently and professionally." "Maintenance contractors don't shoot like that," Williams replied flatly, his voice showing the strain of cognitive dissonance. "I don't care what your paperwork says. People with your capabilities don't end up cleaning weapons unless something very significant happened to put them there. Don't they?" Elena asked quietly, her blue eyes meeting Williams's gaze with steady intensity. "Where did you think people with specialized skills go when they're done using them professionally? When the organizations that train them decide they're no longer needed? When the missions end and the operators have to find new purposes?" The question hit the assembled rangers like a physical blow. Several exchanged glances, suddenly understanding the implications of what Elena was suggesting. If she possessed the shooting skills they'd just witnessed, and if those skills were developed through professional use, then her presence at Fort Campbell wasn't coincidence. It was refuge. Rodriguez was the first to verbalize what they were all thinking. "You're retired." Elena didn't confirm or deny the statement, but her silence was answer enough. She began collecting her cleaning equipment, her movements once again those of a simple maintenance worker. But the facade no longer worked. Everyone in the room had seen behind the mask. "Retired from what?" Williams demanded, his voice showing the strain of someone whose worldview was crumbling. "What organization produces shooters who can do what you just did?" Elena paused in her packing, her hand stilling on the equipment case. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silent range, every word carried clearly. "The kind of organization that doesn't exist on paper, Sergeant. The kind that sends people to places that aren't on maps to do things that never happened. The kind that trains operators to standards that most people can't imagine, then expects them to disappear when their usefulness ends." The admission sent a chill through the crowd of watching rangers. Johnson felt his stomach drop as the implications sank in. Elena wasn't just retired military. She was retired from something much more secretive, much more dangerous than conventional forces. Williams stepped back involuntarily, his tactical mind already working through the ramifications. If Elena was former intelligence, former special operations, or something even more classified, then his treatment of her could have consequences that extended far beyond his own career or the Ranger Company. "Ma'am," Williams said carefully, his earlier aggression replaced by something approaching respect tinged with fear, "I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot here. Perhaps we should start over with proper introductions." Elena looked at him with those steady blue eyes, and for just a moment, Rodriguez saw exhaustion that went deeper than physical tiredness. It was the soul-deep weariness of someone carrying secrets too heavy for one person to bear, someone who had seen too much and lost too much in service to causes that couldn't be acknowledged. "Sergeant Williams," Elena said quietly, her voice carrying a finality that suggested the conversation was ending. "All I wanted was to clean some weapons and finish my maintenance shift. I never intended for any of this to happen." "But it did happen," Rodriguez said gently, recognizing the signs of someone dealing with operational stress and classified trauma. "And now, we all have questions that need answers." Elena shouldered her equipment bag and looked around the circle of Rangers one more time, her gaze lingering on each face as if memorizing them. "Some questions are better left unasked, Master Sergeant. Some answers come with prices that nobody wants to pay." She started walking toward the range exit, but Williams called after her, his voice showing none of its earlier aggression. "Miss Morrison, we're not done here. There are protocols to follow, reports to file, security considerations that need to be addressed." Elena stopped, but didn't turn around. "Yes, Sergeant, we are done. You wanted to know if I could handle military weapons. I've demonstrated that I can. You wanted to know if I was qualified to perform maintenance on precision systems. I've shown you that I am. Anything beyond that is above your clearance level and outside your need to know." The casual mention of clearance levels from someone who supposedly didn't have them was the final piece of the puzzle for the veterans in the crowd. They understood now that they were dealing with someone whose background was not only classified, but classified at levels that even Ranger NCOs couldn't access. "Wait," Johnson called out, surprising himself with his boldness. "Before you go, there's one more thing I need to know. Someone had to teach you to shoot like that. Someone had to provide that level of training. Who was your instructor?" Elena finally turned back toward the group, and Johnson saw something in her expression that made his breath catch. It wasn't sadness exactly, but a profound sense of loss that seemed to encompass more than just memories of training. There was grief there, old and deep, the kind that came from losing people who mattered more than life itself. "He was the best there ever was," she said simply, her voice carrying a weight of memory and regret. "Ghost Wolf 6, and he's been dead for 3 years." With that, Elena Morrison walked out of the range, leaving 20 elite Rangers staring after her in stunned silence. The maintenance worker who had walked into their armory that morning was gone, replaced by the mysterious figure of someone whose true identity remained hidden behind layers of classification and sorrow. But, as Rodriguez would discover in the coming hours, Elena's story was far from over. The skills she'd demonstrated and the hints she'd dropped about her background would trigger investigations and revelations that would change everything. Not just for the Rangers who had witnessed her impossible demonstration of marksmanship, but for Elena herself, who was about to discover that some chapters of life can never truly be closed. The questions that would emerge from this morning's events would lead to discoveries about Operation Dark Winter, about a sniper team that had died in circumstances too classified to acknowledge, and about the sole survivor who had been carrying their memory through 3 years of anonymous service. The truth about Ghost Wolf 6 and the woman who had been his final student was about to surface, bringing with it consequences that would reach from Fort Campbell to the highest levels of military command. Because sometimes the most dangerous secrets aren't the ones about weapons or tactics or classified operations. Sometimes the most dangerous secrets are about the people who've survived things that were supposed to kill them, and what they become when they're left alone with their memories and their guilt. Elena Morrison was about to learn that the past has a way of finding people who think they've successfully disappeared, and when it did, the quiet maintenance worker would have to decide whether to keep running or finally turn and face the ghosts that had been chasing her since that terrible day in Afghanistan when Ghost Wolf 6 and his entire team died, for reasons that had never been adequately explained. The Barrett .50 caliber that had started this morning's confrontation sat cleaned and ready for use, its deadly precision a fitting metaphor for the woman who had demonstrated such unexpected mastery of its capabilities. But the real question wasn't about Elena's ability to maintain weapons, or even to use them with extraordinary skill. The real question was about what would happen when the people who had trained her discovered that Ghost Wolf 6's final student was still alive, still operational, and still carrying secrets that certain powerful individuals had assumed died with her team in the mountains of Afghanistan. That revelation was coming, whether Elena Morrison was ready for it or not. And when it arrived, the quiet world she'd built at Fort Campbell would explode in ways that would force her to choose between the anonymous safety she'd found and the justice that her fallen teammates deserved. The hunt for answers was about to begin, and Elena Morrison, whatever her real name might be, was about to discover that some battles follow you no matter how far you run or how well you hide. The armory remained silent for nearly a full minute after Elena Morrison disappeared through the exit. 20 elite rangers stood frozen in place, each processing what they had just witnessed in their own way. The electronic scoring display continued showing the impossible results. 39 hits out of 40 possible, with shot groups that defied logical explanation for someone supposedly employed as a maintenance contractor. Master Sergeant Rodriguez was the first to move, walking slowly to the abandoned Barrett .50 caliber that had started the morning's confrontation. The weapon sat pristine and perfectly maintained, each component cleaned to standards that exceeded military specifications. But it wasn't the rifle's condition that caught his attention. It was the way Elena had handled it, the unconscious familiarity that spoke of extensive professional experience with precision weapons systems. "Master Sergeant," Williams said quietly, his earlier bravado completely absent, "in your professional opinion, what did we just witness?" Rodriguez was examining the cleaning equipment Elena had left behind, noting the specialized tools and advanced diagnostic devices that were far more sophisticated than standard maintenance supplies. "Sir, those weren't lucky shots. The consistency of her shooting position, the way she controlled her breathing, the natural point of aim development, that's muscle memory developed over thousands of rounds under expert instruction." He paused, picking up one of Elena's cleaning rods and noting the precise wear patterns that indicated extensive use. "And that field stripping demonstration earlier. I've only seen 3 people in my entire career who could disassemble and reassemble an M4 that quickly while maintaining that level of attention to detail. 2 of them were Delta Force operators, and the third runs the Advanced Marksmanship program at Fort Benning." Johnson had been unusually quiet since Elena's departure, his mind working through the implications of everything they had observed. "Master Sergeant, when she mentioned Ghost Wolf 6 being dead for 3 years, did that name mean anything to you?" Rodriguez stopped his examination of the cleaning equipment, his weathered face showing the first signs of genuine concern. "Ghost Wolf is a call sign I've heard mentioned in classified briefings. Special operations designation that's supposed to be compartmented above our clearance level." Williams felt a chill run down his spine as he began to understand the possible magnitude of their situation. "You think she's actually connected to special operations? Not just former military, but something more classified?" "I think," Rodriguez said carefully, "that we need to find out exactly who Elena Morrison really is before this situation escalates any further. And we need to do it through official channels, with proper security protocols." The Secure Communications Center at Fort Campbell was a windowless facility filled with encrypted terminals and satellite uplinks that connected the base to intelligence networks spanning the globe. Rodriguez had spent enough time in similar facilities to know that some background searches produced immediate results, while others disappeared into classification levels that even senior NCOs couldn't access. Elena Morrison's background check fell definitively into the second category. The initial search returned standard employment records, maintenance contractor hired 8 months earlier, clean security clearance, no criminal history, previous employment with various defense contractors. But when Rodriguez attempted to access deeper records, particularly anything related to her background prior to arriving at Fort Campbell, the system returned responses that made his blood run cold. Access denied, classification level insufficient, records sealed by executive order. Contact National Security Advisor for information release. Rodriguez had been conducting security searches for over 2 decades, and he had never encountered a civilian contractor whose records were protected at levels requiring presidential authorization to access. Whatever Elena Morrison had been before becoming a maintenance worker, it was significant enough that multiple federal agencies wanted her past to remain completely buried. But the final search result confirmed Rodriguez's worst fears. When he entered Elena's biometric data into the classified personnel database, the system returned a single line of text that made his hands shake as he read it. Subject deceased, Kaya, Afghanistan 2019. No further information available. According to official military records, Elena Morrison had been killed in action 3 years ago in Afghanistan, which meant that either the records were catastrophically wrong, or the woman cleaning weapons in their armory was someone else entirely, someone using the identity of a dead operative for reasons that could only be imagined. Rodriguez immediately contacted Williams, requesting an emergency meeting in the secure conference room. When Williams arrived 20 minutes later, accompanied by Johnson and several other team members, Rodriguez's expression communicated the gravity of what he'd discovered before he spoke a single word. "We have a serious problem," Rodriguez said without preamble, activating the secure display terminal. "A very serious problem that goes far beyond anything we initially suspected." He showed them the search results, watching their faces change as the implications became clear. The woman they'd been harassing and testing wasn't just someone with mysterious military skills. She was officially dead, killed in action in circumstances that were apparently too classified to document in accessible databases. "She's supposed to be dead," Williams said slowly, his voice showing the strain of trying to process impossible information. "Officially killed in action 3 years ago in Afghanistan. Which means," Rodriguez replied grimly, "either the records are wrong or we've been dealing with someone who has been living under the identity of a deceased operative. And given the classification levels protecting her information, I'm betting it's not an administrative error." Johnson studied the display showing Elena's classified status, his tactical mind racing through possibilities. What if she faked her death? What if something went wrong on her last mission and she needed to disappear completely? Or, Williams said, his voice taking on the grim tone of someone who had seen too much of the darker side of military operations, what if her entire team was killed and she's the only survivor of something that was supposed to remain permanently secret? Before anyone could respond to that disturbing possibility, the conference room door opened and Colonel James Thompson entered. Thompson was a 28-year Army veteran whose weathered face and steel gray hair spoke to decades of dealing with classified situations and sensitive personnel issues that existed in the shadowy margins of official military operations. "Gentlemen," Thompson said, his voice carrying the weight of command authority earned through multiple combat deployments and classified assignments, "we need to discuss your maintenance contractor immediately." The statement confirmed everyone's worst fears. If the base commander was personally involved in Elena's situation, then her background had already escalated beyond the Ranger unit level and into channels that dealt with matters of national security. Thompson activated a different terminal and entered a series of clearance codes that were several levels above anything the Ranger team had access to. The display that appeared made everyone in the room step back involuntarily, struggling to process information that challenged everything they thought they understood about their morning's confrontation. Elena Morrison's true operational file appeared on the screen, replacing the sanitized maintenance records they had seen before. What they discovered changed not just their understanding of who Elena was, but their comprehension of what they had been dealing with since the moment Williams first spotted her, cleaning the Barrett .50 caliber. "Angel of Death," Thompson read from the classified display, his voice heavy with the weight of operational history that few people were authorized to know. "CIA Special Activities Division, 73 confirmed eliminations over 6 years of operations in Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, and other locations that remain classified at levels above your current clearance." The room fell completely silent as the magnitude of Elena's true identity became clear. They hadn't been confronting a maintenance contractor with mysterious skills. They had been challenging one of the most lethal precision marksmen in the operational history of American intelligence services. Thompson continued reading from the classified file, each revelation adding another layer to their understanding of exactly how catastrophically they had misjudged the situation. World record holder for longest confirmed sniper elimination at 3,347 meters. Sole survivor of Operation Dark Winter, which resulted in the deaths of her entire 6-person team under circumstances that remain under active investigation. Williams felt physically sick as he realized the full scope of what had transpired that morning. "Sir, we accused her of being a security risk. We threatened to call base security. We forced her to prove her qualifications through marksmanship testing." His voice trailed off as the implications hit him. "We treated her like a potential threat instead of recognizing her as a decorated veteran who had sacrificed everything for classified operations." Thompson's expression remained professionally neutral, but there was steel in his voice when he responded. "Yes, Sergeant Williams, that's exactly what happened. You challenged someone whose operational record includes eliminations that helped prevent terrorist attacks, disrupted weapons trafficking networks, and eliminated high-value targets that posed direct threats to American forces and civilians." Rodriguez found his voice, though it came out strained with the weight of professional shame. "Sir, what are our options for addressing this situation? How do we make right what we've done wrong?" Thompson was quiet for a long moment, studying the classified file with the expression of someone who had seen too many similar cases of exceptional operators falling through bureaucratic cracks. "That depends entirely on what Elena Morrison decides to do next. Her cover identity has been compromised. Her attempt at anonymous civilian life has been destroyed. She'll either have to disappear again and start over somewhere else, or..." He paused, letting the alternative remain unspoken, but the implication was clear to everyone in the room. "Or what, sir?" Johnson asked, though he suspected he didn't want to hear the answer. "Or she might decide that running and hiding isn't worth the effort anymore," Thompson said grimly. "And for someone with her psychological profile, operational history, and demonstrated capabilities, that could present significant challenges for everyone involved in this morning's events." The next several hours passed in increasing tension as base security attempted to locate Elena. She had left the range and seemingly vanished without a trace, neither returning to her assigned quarters nor reporting to her maintenance supervisor. Her vehicle remained in the parking lot, but she had disappeared as completely as if she possessed the skills of someone trained in evasion and concealment by organizations that specialized in making people invisible. It wasn't until 1600 hours that afternoon that she was finally spotted by a perimeter guard who noticed someone sitting on the observation deck of the base's old communications tower, a restricted area that overlooked the training ranges and provided a commanding view of the entire installation. Williams made the decision to approach Elena personally, despite advice from base security to wait for trained negotiators who specialized in dealing with operators experiencing psychological crises. He felt directly responsible for triggering the situation and believed he owed Elena a personal apology, regardless of the potential risks involved in confronting someone whose psychological state was unknown. The communications tower was accessed by a narrow stairway that wound through the interior of the concrete structure, each step echoing in the confined space and providing Elena with advance warning of his approach. When Williams emerged onto the observation deck, she was exactly where the guard had reported, sitting on the concrete ledge with her legs dangling over the side, staring out at the vast expanse of training grounds that stretched to the horizon. The comprehensive insurance and financial protection systems that Elena maintained included specialized coverage for veterans with classified operational backgrounds, providing legal and financial safeguards that far exceeded standard civilian policies. The advanced investment portfolio she accessed was specifically designed for personnel transitioning from compartmented assignments, offering asset protection and financial security planning that cost significantly more than typical retirement accounts, but provided essential protection against the unique challenges faced by operators with classified service records. "Miss Morrison," Williams said carefully, maintaining respectful distance while positioning himself close enough to speak normally. "May I join you?" Elena didn't turn around, but she nodded slightly, gesturing to the space beside her on the wide concrete ledge. Williams moved to sit next to her, maintaining careful distance while staying close enough for conversation. "I owe you an apology," Williams began, his voice lacking its usual commanding presence. "Actually, I owe you several apologies. For questioning your presence in our armory, for doubting your qualifications, for threatening to involve security, and for treating you with the kind of disrespect that no veteran should ever experience, especially one with your record of service." Elena remained silent, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the late afternoon sun was beginning to cast long shadows across the training facilities. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of ongoing military exercises. Rifle fire shouted commands, the rumble of vehicles conducting tactical maneuvers. "I also owe you an explanation," Williams continued, gathering his thoughts while choosing his words carefully. "Not an excuse, because there isn't one that can justify my behavior, but an explanation for why I reacted the way I did when confronted with someone whose capabilities exceeded every assumption I'd made." He paused, watching a formation of helicopters conducting landing exercises in the distance. "In this profession, we're trained to be suspicious of anomalies, of anything that doesn't fit expected parameters. When someone demonstrates knowledge and skills that exceed what their cover story suggests, our defensive instincts interpret that as a potential threat, rather than recognizing it as evidence of exceptional training and operational experience." Elena finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear in the late afternoon air. "Your instincts weren't entirely wrong, Sergeant Williams. I am an anomaly. I don't belong in your conventional military world anymore, but I don't really fit into the civilian world either. I exist in the spaces between official identities, carrying experiences that can't be acknowledged and skills that can't be explained." "Where do you belong?" Williams asked gently, recognizing that he was hearing someone discuss psychological displacement that went far beyond normal military to civilian transition challenges. Elena was quiet for a long moment, watching training aircraft conduct practice approaches to the base's airfield. "I used to belong with my team, 6 of us working together, watching each other's backs, sharing dangers and victories that the rest of the world will never know existed. We were family in every way that mattered, the only people who truly understood what we did and why it was necessary." Her voice caught slightly, and Williams realized he was hearing her discuss the team that had been killed 3 years earlier in Afghanistan. "They were all I had for 6 years of operations. When they died, I lost more than just colleagues or even friends. I lost my purpose, my identity, my entire reason for existing. The person I used to be died with them in that ambush, and what survived was just fragments trying to figure out how to keep functioning." Williams felt the weight of psychological trauma that went far beyond anything covered in standard military training. Elena wasn't just dealing with survivor's guilt. She was dealing with the complete dissolution of everything that had defined her identity and purpose for the better part of a decade. "But you did survive," Williams said carefully, recognizing that he was venturing into territory that required extreme sensitivity, "and that survival has to count for something meaningful." Elena turned to look at him directly for the first time since he'd arrived, and Williams saw exhaustion in her blue eyes that went deeper than physical tiredness. "Does it? I've spent 3 years trying to convince myself that surviving was worthwhile, that building a quiet, anonymous life helping maintain weapons instead of using them was some kind of meaningful existence." She gestured toward the base sprawling below them, where soldiers were conducting the endless cycle of training and preparation that defined military life. "Today, your team forced me back into being the angel of death. And you know what I realized during those qualification shots? That person never really went away. She was just hiding, waiting for someone to call her out of retirement." Williams felt a growing sense of alarm as he recognized the direction Elena's thoughts were heading. She wasn't just dealing with identity crisis. She was questioning whether her attempt to build a peaceful civilian life had been worth the effort. "This moment is absolutely giving me chills. If you feel the same way, share this video with someone who needs to see that the most dangerous person in a room is often the one everyone underestimates." "Miss Morrison, Elena, what happened today doesn't have to define what happens next," Williams insisted, careful not to make any sudden movements that might be interpreted as threatening. "You have choices about who you want to be going forward. The past doesn't have to determine your future." Elena stood from the ledge with fluid grace that somehow managed to be both casual and precisely controlled. "Doesn't it? Your team knows who I really am now. Base security knows. Colonel Thompson knows. Soon everyone will know that the maintenance contractor is actually someone who shouldn't officially exist." She moved to the edge of the observation deck, her movements controlled despite the height and potential danger. "My cover identity is blown. My quiet, anonymous life is over, and I'm right back to being what I was trained to be, whether I want that or not." "You have options," Williams insisted, standing as well but maintaining careful distance. "You can rebuild somewhere else, start fresh with a new identity, find a different kind of peace. The government has programs for people in your situation." Elena's laugh was bitter, lacking any trace of humor. "Do they? Or is this just the universe telling me that some people don't get to retire from what they really are? That no matter how far you run or how well you hide, The past eventually catches up and forces you back into old patterns? Before Williams could respond, his radio crackled with an urgent transmission that changed everything. All units, we have an unscheduled helicopter approaching the base. Military aircraft requesting immediate landing clearance and priority handling for a high-priority passenger. Williams keyed his radio with growing suspicion. Control, this is Williams. What kind of passenger requires priority handling? The response sent ice through his veins. Sir, the helicopter is requesting permission to transport a CIA liaison officer who says he needs to speak with Angel of Death immediately. He claims it's a matter of national security that can't be delayed. Elena and Williams stared at each other, both understanding the implications immediately. Elena's past wasn't just catching up with her. It was arriving via military helicopter with official authority and urgent priority that suggested something significant was happening in the classified world she'd tried to leave behind. They found me, Elena said quietly, her voice showing resignation rather than surprise. I should have known I couldn't stay hidden forever. People with my operational history don't get to simply disappear and live quiet lives maintaining weapons. The helicopter appeared on the horizon moments later, a sleek military transport that approached the base with the purposeful directness of an official mission that brooked no delays or complications. As it circled for landing, Elena made a decision that would alter everything about the situation they were facing. Sergeant Williams, I need you to do something important for me, she said, her voice taking on the crisp authority of someone accustomed to giving orders in life-and-death situations. What do you need? Williams asked, recognizing the transformation in Elena's demeanor from traumatized veteran to operational professional. Elena reached into her jacket pocket and withdrew a small envelope, sealed and unmarked except for a single address written in her precise handwriting. If something happens to me, if I don't return from whatever this is, I need you to mail this letter. The address will ensure it reaches people who need to know the truth about what really happened to my team. Williams accepted the envelope, noting its weight and the careful way Elena handled it, as if it contained something infinitely precious and dangerous. What's in it? The truth, Elena replied simply. About Operation Dark Winter, about why my team really died, about what I've learned in the 3 years since I supposedly died with them. Everything that certain people hoped would remain buried forever. The helicopter touched down on the base landing pad with rotor wash that created a whirlwind of dust and debris. Through the aircraft's windows, they could see figures in dark suits preparing to disembark, the kind of nondescript government officials who dealt with matters too sensitive for normal bureaucratic channels. Elena, Williams said urgently, recognizing that he might be witnessing the end of whatever peace she'd managed to find. You don't have to go with them. You've served your country enough. You've given more than anyone should be asked to sacrifice. Elena looked at him with something that might have been gratitude mixed with profound sadness. Sergeant Williams, some people never really leave the battlefield. They just change positions and wait for the next engagement. She started walking toward the tower stairs, then paused and looked back. And Williams, take care of your team. They're good soldiers even when they make mistakes. Don't let what happened today define them or destroy the potential I saw in their capabilities. Williams watched her descend the stairs, knowing that he was witnessing the transformation of Elena Morrison, the maintenance worker, into something much more dangerous and much more purposeful. He looked down at the envelope in his hands, feeling its weight like a stone that carried the burden of classified truth. By the time Williams reached the base landing pad, Elena was already walking toward the helicopter with the measured pace of someone who had made peace with an inevitable confrontation. The CIA liaison officer who emerged to meet her was a thin man in his 50s, wearing the kind of unremarkable suit that screamed federal authority while attempting to appear completely forgettable. Their conversation was brief and conducted in voices too low for anyone else to hear, but Williams could see Elena's body language shift as she received whatever information the liaison was providing. When she turned back toward the assembled Rangers one final time, Williams saw something in her expression that made his blood run cold. Elena Morrison was gone. In her place stood someone harder, more focused, infinitely more dangerous. Someone who had spent 3 years trying to forget how to be lethal and was now remembering with crystalline clarity. As Elena approached the helicopter, Williams noticed details that his morning of confrontation had prevented him from seeing clearly. The way she moved with tactical spacing that kept multiple avenues of escape available. How her eyes automatically cataloged potential threats and defensive positions. the unconscious way her hands positioned themselves for immediate access to concealed weapons that might or might not exist. This wasn't someone who had once been a soldier. This was someone who had been forged into a weapon by organizations that specialized in creating operators capable of achieving impossible missions under conditions that would destroy normal people. "Sergeant Williams," Elena called out, her voice carrying clearly across the landing pad despite the noise of the helicopter's rotors. "Remember what I told you about taking care of your team, and remember that real warriors understand the difference between strength and violence, between capability and cruelty." Then she climbed into the helicopter and disappeared into the darkening sky, leaving behind only questions and the lingering sense that something significant had ended while something infinitely more dangerous was beginning. Williams stood holding Elena's letter as the aircraft became a distant speck over the Kentucky landscape. Around him, his rangers watched in silence, each processing their own thoughts about what they had witnessed and participated in throughout this extraordinary day. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez," Williams said finally, his voice showing the strain of someone whose worldview had been fundamentally altered. "I want a complete after-action report on today's events, and I want recommendations for how we prevent this kind of catastrophic failure of recognition and respect from ever happening again." "Understood, sir," Rodriguez replied. "But Sergeant Williams, what do you think that letter contains?" Williams looked down at the envelope, noting for the first time that it wasn't addressed to a person, but to an organization whose name he recognized from classified briefings about oversight of intelligence operations and investigation of operational failures that occurred in classified programs. "I think," Williams said slowly, "it contains the kind of truth that someone thought was worth dying to protect. And I think we're about to discover that Elena Morrison's story is far from over." 3 weeks later, Williams received news that confirmed his worst suspicions about the forces Elena had become involved with. The CIA liaison officer who had collected her from Fort Campbell was found dead in his hotel room in Washington, D.C., apparently from a heart attack that occurred under circumstances too convenient to be entirely believable. Official investigations concluded that he had died of natural causes, but the timing struck Williams as suspiciously convenient for people who wanted to eliminate loose ends and uncomfortable questions about classified operations that were supposed to remain permanently buried. Elena vanished completely from all official records. No documentation, no trace, no indication that she had ever existed beyond the false identity that had brought her to Fort Campbell. But Rodriguez, utilizing contacts developed over 22 years of military service, began hearing rumors from people who specialized in tracking individuals who operated in the margins between official acknowledgement and complete deniability. The truth that emerged was both more complex and more disturbing than anything they had imagined. Elena Morrison had indeed been Angel of Death, one of the most effective precision marksmen in CIA operational history, but Operation Dark Winter hadn't been a routine intelligence mission that had gone wrong due to bad luck or enemy action. Elena's letter, which Williams had mailed as requested, revealed classified information that triggered investigations reaching into the highest levels of intelligence community leadership. Dark Winter had been betrayed from within. Her team's deaths weren't accidental casualties of a dangerous mission. They had been deliberately sacrificed to protect intelligence assets and operational secrecy that certain powerful individuals considered more valuable than the lives of 6 operators. Elena's survival and subsequent disappearance hadn't been rescue or coincidental good fortune. It had been careful extraction by elements within the intelligence community who needed someone with her capabilities for assignments that required complete deniability and absolute precision. Advanced cybersecurity training and specialized legal consultation services that Elena had accessed during her transition included comprehensive education programs about digital privacy, identity protection, and legal rights for personnel with classified operational backgrounds. The sophisticated legal support network provided expert consultation on veteran rights, identity security, and legal issues related to classified information disclosure, ensuring compliance with federal laws while protecting personal security during the complex transition from classified operations to civilian life. 6 months later, Williams received an encrypted message through channels that shouldn't have existed and couldn't be traced through normal military communication systems. The message was brief, professionally composed, and more disturbing than reassuring. The truth survives even when its carriers don't. Angel of Death was never really about elimination targets. It was about eliminating problems that threatened operational security. Some problems require permanent solutions. Williams kept the message, understanding that Elena had found her way back to the world she'd tried to escape, but in a capacity that was probably more dangerous and certainly less official than her previous service. The maintenance worker who had cleaned weapons at Fort Campbell had been a refuge identity. What she had become after her extraction was something that existed in the spaces between governments, serving interests that transcended national boundaries. Elena's truth is about to be revealed completely. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss these incredible stories about hidden heroes among us. The consequences of that morning's confrontation continued to ripple outward through official channels and classified networks for months after Elena's disappearance. Williams received official reprimands for his treatment of a person under federal protection, though the specifics of Elena's status remained classified at levels above his clearance. He was required to complete sensitivity training and conflict de-escalation courses that emphasize respect for all personnel, regardless of apparent background or official designation. Rodriguez found himself reassigned to a training position where his responsibilities included developing recognition protocols for identifying veterans who might be living undercover identities for security reasons. His experience with Elena became a case study used to train other NCOs about the importance of recognizing signs that indicated more complex backgrounds than official records might suggest. Johnson discovered that his questions about Elena's identity had triggered security reviews that would follow him throughout his military career. While he wasn't punished for his curiosity, he learned that asking the wrong questions about the right people could have long-term consequences that affected clearance levels and assignment opportunities. Martinez, whose competitive nature had initiated much of the testing that revealed Elena's capabilities, found himself struggling with the knowledge that his need to prove superiority had humiliated someone whose achievements far exceeded anything he would ever accomplish. He requested transfer to a different unit, unable to continue serving, in an environment where his actions had contributed to compromising the security of a veteran seeking anonymous peace. The Ranger unit itself underwent comprehensive retraining focused on veteran recognition, respect for service members regardless of current assignment, and protocols for handling encounters with personnel whose backgrounds might be more complex than their current roles suggested. Elena's story became a cautionary tale used throughout Fort Campbell to remind soldiers that exceptional people often chose humble positions for reasons that had nothing to do with their actual capabilities. But the most significant long-term impact was the establishment of new support networks for veterans transitioning from classified operations to civilian life. Elena's experience highlighted gaps in existing programs and led to the creation of better protection protocols for operators who needed to disappear for security reasons while still receiving the support and recognition their service had earned. Colonel Thompson, who had been instrumental in revealing Elena's true background, found himself tasked with developing institutional reforms that would prevent similar incidents while maintaining necessary operational security. The balance between protecting classified veterans and ensuring they received appropriate recognition for their service became an ongoing challenge that required constant refinement. A year after Elena's disappearance, Williams received a final communication that provided closure to questions that had haunted him since that morning in the armory. The message arrived through the same untraceable channels as the previous encrypted communication, but this time it contained more detailed information about Elena's current status and the resolution of issues that had led to her extraction from Fort Campbell. Operation Dark Winter investigations completed, responsible parties identified and dealt with through appropriate channels. Angel of Death designation officially retired. Elena Morrison currently serves as senior instructor for classified marksmanship programs. Her service is acknowledged at appropriate levels. Your team's recognition of her capabilities and ultimate respect for her background contributed to successful resolution of security concerns. Consider this matter officially closed. Williams understood that Elena had found a form of peace that balanced her need for purposeful service with the security requirements that governed her existence. She was no longer hiding from her past, but she wasn't exactly living in public either. She had found the space between official acknowledgement and complete anonymity where someone with her unique background could serve effectively while maintaining the protection that her operational history required. The Barrett .50 caliber that had started the morning's confrontation remained in the Fort Campbell Armory, maintained to standards that reflected Elena's influence on the unit's approach to weapons care and respect. But more importantly, it served as a reminder that expertise could appear in unexpected forms, and that the most dangerous assumption soldiers could make was that they understood someone's capabilities based on their appearance or current assignment. Rodriguez, in his new role training NCOs about veteran recognition, would often use Elena's story to illustrate the importance of looking beyond surface appearances and official designations. Real warriors, he would tell his students, don't always wear their achievements on their uniforms. Sometimes the most lethal person in the room is the one everybody underestimates, and sometimes the greatest honor we can give to exceptional service is the respect to let it remain quietly anonymous. The lesson that emerged from Elena Morrison's brief appearance at Fort Campbell was ultimately about recognition, respect, and the understanding that strength takes many forms. The Rangers who had mocked her appearance and questioned her qualifications learned that their assumptions about capability and worth were not just wrong, but dangerously incomplete. But perhaps the most important lesson was about the warriors who choose to serve in silence, who trade recognition for security, and who find purpose in maintaining the tools of war rather than wielding them. Elena Morrison had shown them that some heroes prefer to remain hidden, and that the greatest tribute to exceptional service is sometimes simply the recognition that it existed, combined with the wisdom to let it continue existing on its own terms. The final message Williams received about Elena came 2 years after her disappearance, delivered through conventional mail rather than encrypted channels. It was a photograph showing a group of precision marksmen at a classified training facility, their faces obscured for security reasons, but their posture and equipment indicating advanced instruction was taking place. On the back of the photograph, someone had written a single line, "Ghost Wolf 6 would be proud of his final student." Williams kept the photograph in the same secure location where he stored Elena's original letter, understanding that both items represented something larger than individual stories of service and sacrifice. They represented the understanding that excellence in service to others often requires invisibility, that the most effective protection of democratic values sometimes occurs in shadows, and that the greatest heroes are often those who never seek recognition for their contributions. Elena Morrison, whoever she really was beneath all the classified designations and operational codes, had reminded an entire Ranger unit that respect should be universal, that capability comes in unexpected forms, and that the strongest people are often those who choose quiet service over public recognition. Her brief time at Fort Campbell had changed everyone who encountered her, not because of her demonstrated skills with weapons or her impossible marksmanship, but because she had shown them a different definition of strength, one that included the courage to remain anonymous, the wisdom to serve without seeking credit, and the grace to teach important lessons while asking for nothing in return. And sometimes, Williams came to understand, those are the most important lessons of all, that real warriors don't need to prove themselves to anyone, that genuine strength speaks for itself, and that the most dangerous person in any room is usually the one who has nothing left to prove. The story of Elena Morrison became part of Fort Campbell's unofficial history, passed down through informal channels as a reminder that exceptional people walk among us every day, often choosing humble positions for reasons that have nothing to do with their actual capabilities. Her legacy wasn't just about precision marksmanship or classified operations. It was about the importance of seeing people clearly, treating everyone with respect, and understanding that the most extraordinary individuals often work very hard to appear completely ordinary. Because sometimes the maintenance worker cleaning weapons in your armory isn't just maintaining equipment. Sometimes she's maintaining hope that peace is possible, that her skills will never again be needed for their intended purpose, and that the world can be protected by people who prefer to remain invisible. And sometimes those people are exactly who they appear to be, until circumstances force them to become something else entirely. Elena Morrison had been both versions of herself, the quiet maintenance worker seeking peace, and the lethal precision marksman serving classified missions. The Rangers who encountered her had been privileged to witness both, and in doing so, they had learned that heroism comes in many forms, that service takes countless shapes, and that the most important recognition we can give to exceptional people is simply the respect to let them define themselves, rather than allowing our assumptions to define them for us. It was a lesson worth learning, worth remembering, and worth passing on to future generations of warriors who would face their own challenges in recognizing worth that doesn't advertise itself, respecting service that doesn't seek acknowledgement, and understanding that sometimes the most dangerous people in the world are also the most gentle, until circumstances require them to be otherwise. The phone rang in Elena's current location, wherever that might be, and when she answered it, she would once again have to choose between the peace she sought and the service that others needed. Because some people never really leave the battlefield. They just change positions and wait for the next mission to begin. But that, Williams understood, was a story for another day. Years later, when Williams had retired from active duty and become an instructor himself, he would tell Elena's story to new classes of Rangers. Not the classified details, those would remain buried in secure files forever, but the essential lesson that she had taught through her quiet dignity and unexpected revelation. Real strength, he would say, watching young faces that reminded him of his own arrogance that morning in the armory, doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. It simply exists, ready to serve when called upon, content to remain hidden when not needed. He would pause, remembering blue eyes that had shown patience instead of anger, competence instead of pride. The most dangerous person in any room might be the maintenance worker, the janitor, the quiet person everyone ignores. Not because they're plotting harm, but because they have already faced the worst the world has to offer and chosen to use their strength for protection rather than destruction. The lesson had cost his unit their assumptions about worth and capability. But in return, they had gained something far more valuable, the understanding that heroism often wears work clothes, that legends sometimes clean equipment instead of carrying it into battle, and that the greatest warriors are often those who hope their skills will never again be needed for their intended purpose.